Well, hello to everybody and welcome back to In My Shed. I'm BC. Today's episode is cutting off the cutter. This is an annular cutter used in a magnetic based drilling machine, and the customer had a bit of a whoops where the whole lot fell off the table onto the floor and it's chipped quite a big chunk out of the cutter there. Following tooth has been knocked a little bit. Interestingly, I can tell this is one that I've ground before because of the equal facet angles and equal facet width. Also, if you grind it reasonably concentrically, the centre line between the two facets is reasonably circular, concentric with the bore of the cutter. As you take the cutting tip above and below centre, that line through the cutting edges or the facets will alter. So you can tell whether you're too high or too low, or sometimes you have to do it to get in behind the inside edge, but it gives you a bit of a guide as to what you're going on with. Now, last week I cut some 12mm spiral flute taps off that I'd reground to get them short enough to go into bottoming in the hole, and I was amazed at how well this cut-off wheel works. It's a Chinese made Blue Shark cut-off wheel. It's supposed to be 125 by 1mm, however it measures up at 125 by 1.27mm. It's double reinforced, which is indicated by the external reinforcing on the wheel, and I think it's got a little bit of 46 grit mixed in with the 60 to make it cut a bit better, and I would say all the sweeping off the floor has been thrown into the cutter because it gives a fairly good finish and it's reasonably burr free. So I was very impressed with the cutting off the taps, so I thought we'll give it a go today on this annular cutter, getting it ready to regrind. Now, another thing I check before I go too far with them is I make sure the margins aren't chipped and buggered. Quite often these cutters come in and they actually have forward taper, where the front is of a smaller diameter than the back, which is the reverse of what you want. If that's the case, you've got to come back until the damage is removed by cutting off, and sometimes that doesn't leave enough distance within the flute to make the whole job worthwhile. But this will be a good exercise. If I get a chance, I'll show gulleting and sharpening the cutter as well. But I'll put a bit of power on, start the machine up, and we can have a go at cutting it off, see what it runs like. Back in a sec. Bit of power on. We usually come in about 5 hours at a time. Speed. I have a big dislike for the non-reinforced cut-off wheels. I just don't feel safe using them. there's the job done. As I said, the finish is quite acceptable. Now, prior to doing it this way, and this is the first annular cutter I've cut off like this, I had been doing them offhand with an angle grinder with the cutter clamped in a gulleting holder on my welding bench. And look, it's a little bit faster than this, but the cutter comes out with a skewed face. No matter how hard you try, you've got about 5 or 6 minutes regrinding to get them all at right angles across the top. And I think this way will actually save me a bit of time. A bit rowdy, I should put the bloody earmuffs on. I don't think it does my ears well. But when you consider that the wheel is running at 4,000 RPM when it's designed to run at an angle grinder at 10,000 RPM, I'm just amazed at how aggressive it is and how easily it cuts the high-speed steel. So, oh, still bloody hot. So, be a bit more careful this time. Quite a reasonable job. Oh, get it to view a little bit better. There. So I'm happy with that. Now I'll set up another grinder and let you have a look at me doing the gulleting. Bye for now. Okay, well now for the gulleting. I've got the axis of the tool holder around so that the rake angle of the flute is parallel to the side of the wheel, and I have the holder tilted up at the back quite a bit so that I should clear the other flute and still be able to give a reasonably deep gullet. Now, as I have to fully reform the teeth, the gullet has to be fairly deep, and this forms a rake face at the front of the flute, so away we go. Gulleting done, nothing to it. Surprisingly, that wheel has been on this machine for 18 years now, I think, and done thousands and thousands of cutters. It's a Ruby Alox wheel. It's a little bit hard, so it'll keep its form against aggressive saw blades having a go at it. Does a really good job, and on the other side of the grinder is a thin wheel for doing the very, very small cutters. So this particular product is good for this particular job. That's what I've got to stress. Okay, off for now. Well, back again on the old RU 450 tool and cutter grinder, one of my favourite machines. The cutter is being put in the collet, the indexing finger adjusted to where I think it'll do a decent job. Tighten that up, and I'll just have a goosey on the other side. Goosey, goosey gander, that's near enough to one centre. I prefer to grind the inside teeth first, and on this cutter I'll set it up to about 17.5 degrees of incline. Lock the base at the workhead, wind the cutter in. It's a bit of a juggling act getting in far enough to grind in behind a tooth and not interfere with the following tooth, but I think that's good to go. Move the table stop along. And now we'll apply a little bit of noise. I'll keep grinding on the inside facet until I see on the cutting edge that I've chamfered it across just over halfway. Then I'll rotate around to the other direction to grind the outer facet. So I'll turn the camera off now rather than bore your attention. Right, now we'll swing the head around and do the other facets. You can feed about 0.1mm per pass, about 4 hours. It's a fairly new wheel, it's been well dressed, so it cuts fairly aggressively. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with the last wheel. It was about 2/3 worn out and it just wasn't dressing correctly and it just would not cut. And finally I realised they must be using very poor quality material for the back half of the wheel. I put this new one on, dressed it up, and the difference was just extraordinary. I suppose we're just not expected to wear the wheels out all the way. It does take a bit longer with the cutter that's been cut off as you have to fully form the teeth again. With a cutter that's just worn and not reformed, you're through this operation in just 2 or 3 minutes. But for every easy cutter you do, you get 3 or 4 hard ones. As you're regrinding the facets, you can see the tooth forming across the top there. And when you get close to the middle or close to the changing of the facets, it's time to have a bit of a look. Just a couple more passes and that'll be okay. Yep, I'll say that's fair enough. We'll spin it round and have a look. I'll get another light. You can see that both the facets are approximately the same size. Could have done another pass or two on the outside, but it doesn't really need it. The line down the middle of the two facets is fairly straight, and I'm pleased with that job. It's come up quite well. Didn't earn a lot of money, but new cutter goes out there and it's all about saving high-speed steel. It's very expensive to buy, it's expensive to manufacture, and it's a bit of a finite resource, so we should really look after them. Okay, that's it for now. Bye.